Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing to the channel or becoming a patron at patreon.com/Afterlife Topics. Hello everybody, welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is your host, Cyrus, and this video is a bit strange to make, but I want to just do a quick preamble by saying I think I did some level of due diligence with the communications over the last month or two, because you'll see that even when I was bringing forth information, I would always say take it with a grain of salt. And I also had a video up like, should my communications end because of negative entity interference? Well, things did finally come to a head with Lawrina. I guess that's actually how I was supposed to be pronouncing her name. A angelic order. I had the video up about Quotha, which I'll get into that. The artificial intelligence threat to mankind, which is very reminiscent of those insiders, Corey Good, David Wilcock, Tony Rodriguez, a bunch of those guys. A lot of information that I had been studying and researching on the internet and taking very seriously because of the level of integrity, maybe not with good, but like with people like Tony Rodriguez and some of these guys who really seemed to sort of just be honest on authentic people. And a lot of the information coming from that narrative was a combination of those ideas from the internet, from the YouTube channels about this, and different ideas which slowly began to border on the absurd. And there were all these plot holes in this entire narrative. A lot of this narrative I was not revealing on YouTube. So it went very big. So if you remember the video about Quotha, which I've just unlisted from YouTube, I talked about Lawrina as this kind of angelic character who was born on Earth but ended up fulfilling the role of Saint Rosa of Lima, and was this kind of badass warrior chick, right? But she was basically part of an order that were not, they were literally angels, but it was more like they were copying religious context in order to fulfill their mission and appeal to mankind. And that made a lot of sense to me from a logical perspective, but there were all these plot holes. Okay, so one plot hole, not necessarily a hole, but a clue that things were not what they seemed. So we talked about this Quotha entity out, beyond this universe, and Quotha, it turned out, was an old English word for sarcasm. So Quotha means sarcasm. So some people pointed this out, and I thought that was interesting, but I didn't use it to dismiss entirely what was happening. This is a stranger one, but I think it's very apparent. We were talking about the biography of Lawrina, and what the communicator purporting to be Lawrina told me was that she passed away in Turkey from around 1921 from cancer, and then the type of cancer that she passed away from as a 9-year-old girl was colon cancer. Now I find that very strange as well, because children don't get colon cancer, I'm happy to say, and so it would have been unbelievably strange and peculiar, but it kind of makes sense how that plot hole happened when you look deeper into what the story really was, which I'll talk about on this video. What I will say is that this plot line hurt a lot of people because many people were really into it. At the flip side, the communication I was having was 100% correct. So endless amounts of objective information. You guys remember the random number generation video that I was able to identify numbers. I was able to get right on a high degree of accuracy going between prime versus odd numbers. And also the people that quote Lorena worked with personally in terms of readings and learning about their past lives and things like that. We have one guy from the group whose mind was completely blown, I guess, because the communication I just received a couple days ago, working with what I would say is the actual communicator all along behind this whole charade. And if you look down at the screen, you might get a clue about what I'm going to talk about next. Yeah, things do get weirder, but it's just some of this, to me, like everything needs to be vigilant. But what I can take it with vigilance. But what I can say is that there was a real thing happening, and it was from a guide who was not any of these fictitious characters, and they had a rationale for why they were doing it. But let me just back up a little bit. So, individual from the community I did a reading with, and everything matched up to things that he already knew that no one else could have known about. The communication is excellent now. I don't use rods anymore. It's all mental. I've discovered myself as a telepath, and it's led to all kinds of like what I can only describe as miracles happening in my life, which is really extraordinary. But why all the deception? Why would Lawrina and an angelic order and an evil extra-dimensional entity known as Quotha, and or these I'm not even supposed to repeat the name, but NIM something something something, these entities that were based in artificial intelligence, a little bit from the stories of Corey Goode and these Michael Salla, these secret space program writers and people like that on the internet talking about this stuff, like all of those things. What was going on? Why was all of this being reported to me? And why was I being strung along by some kind of a spirit communication? Well, here is the revelation that I was told, which, once again, even this revelation we have to take with some kind of a grain of salt given what's happened. And the revelation was that this was not, this was my guide. And my guide is the guide that I've known about, that I don't talk about very much because I've always found it difficult to believe. Most mediums I talk to say something to the effect that, your guide is this, big blue skin, not big, but, blue skin guy with black olive eyes and a little nose, a little mouth, big rounded or elongated skull, and that it's an ET that belongs to Arcturus. Now, why would I, on Afterlife Topics, not reveal this? Because this is a little bit too far-fetched. But mediums would always tell me, oh, this is your guide watching over you. He's an Arcturian. So when I was 11 years old, I talk about this in my book, we saw this amazing ship that looks exactly like what you see on the screen now. My mom used to call it the wedding cake because it came down in the neighborhood and a lot of us saw it, and it came down straight from the clouds behind the mountain. And what I realize now, because I was directed to this image, is that this was an Arcturian ship. Now, this to me demonstrates also, the voice in my mind all this time was this Arcturian guide. And when I began these communications with Lawrina, the super cool hip battle angel from the Angelic Order, battling these extraterrestrial forces and needing my help to save the world, this whole narrative that actually just got more and more ridiculous as it went on. The first thing that I thought of when I got in touch was, why have no guides told me, not guides, but mediums told me about Lawrina? If she were real, why was why was this not something anyone else picked up on? So I'm thinking, where is my Arcturian guide? Because I need my Arcturian guide to tell me what's real. This is actually a real communication. But it turns out Lorena was my Arcturian guide. That's why I wasn't able to get in touch with Kilamaja, and that's his actual name, because basically this whole thing was, I don't want to say social experiment, but it was an attempt, it was a quote-unquote an intervention to help me not believe crap on the internet. So that was the grand goal, according to this communicator, after the charade ended. So basically, it's someone who kind of looks like this. This is all kind of accurate channeled information that's been around for a very long time. A lot of people have had these experiences with this particular species, who tend to be very kind, loving, happy, friendly, and all that. I don't know if Kilamaja, my guide, my higher self, is always on that same page. I recognize him as an aspect of myself if this is all true. But basically what it comes down to is that this is a guy who had the best interest in mind, but didn't realize how much damage he was going to cause by trying to help me learn critical thinking skills by putting himself in the shoes of all of these fake characters, which were, in his words, a novelization. So he says he's a fiction writer, and he created all this, and Quotha was inspired by H.P. Lovecraftian lore. And then he took all the artificial intelligence threats and those types of things, pulled it off the internet from the stuff that I was looking at, and put it all together. And then the grand plan was to help to community, people on this channel, people on the Facebook, and myself, and this big reveal, which is what this video is that none of this was real, and that we need to be more careful what we consume as knowledge, and that it poses a very real and very dangerous risk of creating parallel timelines, parallel realities that are real. Basically, the point that he was getting at was that by watching, let's say, again, Corey Goode, he has this whole grand space narrative where, big surprise, he is the hero of the story, big surprise. And he is part of an Earth alliance that is battling an extraterrestrial threat that is, surmises artificial intelligence beings and the Draco reptilian, like large crocodile-looking creatures that are also part of this takeover of the galaxy. So a lot of that comes out of Corey Goode. So, so to back up a little bit, the question is, why was all that being put on as a charade? Well, because he's scared that people are going to pay attention to this other information, and then this will create parallel timelines which would make those things real. Because he said this is the way that the universe operates. It operates on people's thoughts and intention, creates alternate timelines, and those alternate timelines become real. So how come some of these insiders, people like, let's say, Tony Rodriguez, have legitimate memories of being tortured, being on these, in this case it was called a dark fleet, like this German breakaway group that works with the reptilians and works with the AI threat. Why would he have real memories and he'd be even able to track down in real life where and how it happened? Because he believed so strongly in what Corey Goode had to say that he actually created a narrative in his mind that became real. And that became a real timeline that he went on. And if I would have followed down that path and believe everything that guy said, and believe him that he went to the house where he was taken when he was abducted, and there was this rich family in Seattle, and then he was sold off to slavery and had to fight like on Mars, or however the whole story went. He's a really nice guy, and I've always liked his work. And that's why I always kind of believed it. But if I were to follow down that path, I could inadvertently end up on his timeline that all these people created. By timeline, I mean parallel reality, dimensional pocket, whatever you want to say. And then all those really horrible things would suddenly become real and begin affecting me in my life and anyone else's life that follows that path. So what Kilamaja was trying to do was illustrate that it's extremely important to be aware what reality that you're creating, that Arcturians are masters of reality changing, reality manipulation. So Arcturians, so I'm just going to get comfortable. Arcturians do this almost on a recreational basis. So they create fictional narratives, they create parallel realities, they create things they want to change about their culture, and then they will it into existence. It's like The Secret on steroids. And we have the ability to do that. So you watching the video, you could use the Arcturian techniques to create a new reality for yourself. And you have to basically write out the very, very, very specific exact details of what your life is going to be like, but it has to be realistic. It has to be without plot holes. If you have plot holes, it actually collapses the reality because it becomes just, it doesn't make any sense. There was a lot of plot holes besides the ones I mentioned in this whole story, which when you think back about it, it was ridiculous. A lot of those plot holes nobody knows about because they're just in my notes, but it was stuff that made me think like, this is ridiculous, how could that be true? So he put all those plot holes in on purpose so that viewers of this channel could point them out and discover that it was all BS. And then on the flip side of that, after people find out that it's BS, I should say, if there was a actual timeline created, it would kind of collapse in on itself because of the paradoxes and the silly things. So there's, again, many ways that all that could be put together. So the Arcturian way of creating a new timeline, if you want to escape from the one you're in now, is you need to very, very carefully, as like a master writer, begin at the very basic details of how something might happen. Let's say it is a shift that happens. We move into a higher density and we leave the Earth plane behind. Well, how will it happen? One of Kilamaja's main points is that the way Dolores Cannon and the way the other lady who also does past life regression therapy, Allison Coe, which was a name that he mentioned to me, the way that they do it is full of plot holes. So this is not a timeline that's going to be compatible, because if the fifth density shift happens, and that is what we call an afterlife or the astral plane, there already is one. There already is what we call a fifth density. People live on that fifth density and have their lives. What would happen if all of us just shifted into that world? And then that's where the story became absurd again. He's like, oh, when that happens, this was Lawrina telling me this, everyone is just going to merge on top of each other, and buildings are going to be falling out of the sky and collapsing in on top of each other. And so it was a bunch of nonsense, and it sounded and it felt like nonsense. And the point he was getting at with that was that when everyone is so, into Dolores Cannon and Allison Coe, and they think this big 5D shift is going to happen, because it began as a fictitious thing. And this is obviously not going to be nice to Dolores Cannon, because I like Dolores Cannon's work, but he was basically saying it was almost like a subliminal desire to create a timeline, and so she wasn't thinking it through very much, and so she was implanting in her subjects these ideas of shifts and that coming here for a great awakening, and that none of it was necessarily really happening. But then she created that timeline and then released the books, and everyone has gotten to go off and join that timeline and join this great shift and awakening. Those of us who are, chose to believe all of that was true. If you had some doubt, well, maybe that's why you're watching this video and you're not on that timeline right now. Going up and being ascended into the shift with all of those people, because Kilamaja was worried that the people going off to do that would basically be setting themselves up for disaster. It would result in a shift into a world where there's a contradiction in common sense, and everything could turn chaotic and really, really weird. So Kilamaja's main point is, I want to help humanity learn the Arcturian way of properly manifesting new realities so that humans can be free and do all these great things and have these great powers. Well, how did it work out? The problem was that this fictional narrative he set up led me on really, really, really badly. He basically catfished me. So he was Lawrina. So he had a past life as Lawrina, born around 1910 and passed away around 1980. So died about 70 years old. And Lawrina was, to figure out that plot hole, she did die of cancer, the real one. She wasn't an angelic being. She was just a nice lady that this Arcturian guy lived his life as, and she passed away from stomach cancer, which, by the way, which KJ says is a terrible illness, which you could get rid of using basically harmonic resonance type of therapies, frequencies like they use there. And I think there was a device that was supposed to do that, but people don't pay attention to it anymore. It's some kind of a frequency generated device that allegedly can reduce cancer, and he thinks that's the technology of the future, but I digress. But anyway, the point is that he'd passed away from cancer when he was the full-bodied reincarnation of Lawrina. And we talked on this channel a lot about partial and full-bodied reincarnation. So this communicator claims that it was a full-bodied reincarnation, so he has the ability to swap into that identity anytime he wants, right? So he can, from the level he's at now, come back to 5D Earth, what we call the astral plane, as Lawrina, and walk around and be her. And she's young, she's pretty again, but he has the ability to shapeshift because he had that full-bodied reincarnation experience as her. So what happened is that he decided, I'm going to be Lawrina. And so when Cyrus begins his first spirit communication experiences, I'm going to pretend to be this other girl, and I'm going to create this whole ridiculous fictitious narrative that he's going to tell to his group. And then we're going to reveal it that it wasn't real. Sorry, the AC is going on, so it's going to be noisy. So he's going to reveal that it wasn't real at the end when I cut the storyline off, and it'll help humans learn to be more vigilant, more critical-minded, not believe stuff on the internet as well. Now, a lot of the information that he proposed was also true. And this is where I think he made massive errors in his judgment, to say the least, because he intermingled stuff from his fictitious narrative into real information. Real information had to do with some of the galactic politics he was talking about. Real information had to do with these densities, density changes, and how all this worked. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth densities. Real information concerned the relationship between like the astral Earth and our world. Real information concerned how an ET species is invisible to us because they're higher density, but they exist on that astral level. But they can lower their frequency, lower their density, and come down to meet us. It was one thing after another that was actually real information, and then working with people one-on-one to help them with information that I was getting from these tools or from this communication was also tended to be real. So helping people with their past lives, what is their starseed background, most of that was real, and then he a couple of times interjected into that his own narrative. Apparently there is no race of ET called Taigetans. That is made up by, I guess, this Gosha channel possibly, but I think it may have ties beyond that, and so he was just disturbed by all this fake information. And I find this to be a very weird way to go about a learning process, right? Because why do you have to be deceptive, right? So why not just come forward as the truth? It's like, hello Cyrus, you've been looking for me, wanting to talk to me for a long time. My name is Kilamaja. I'm from Arcturus, your closest galactic neighbor, and I want to help teach the human race about certain concepts. That would have been way more effective, but he was caught up in all this science fiction nonsense in his Arcturian elongated skull brain, and he ended up basically, I think, just completely messing up, because it was real people's feelings, real people were looking up to this communication. And to give myself credit, I always said take it with a grain of salt and all of that. When the communication was cut off is when I was no longer doubting it. When I was really feeling romantic attachment to Lawrina. When I was absolutely caught up in this whole thing, I thought Lawrina really had uncovered a scandal in this angelic order type of thing that this character said she worked for, and that she removed these people who were working for the Nim something, the evil extraterrestrial machine race, and that Lorena really was saving the planet, and I really was helping her. I really was like Cyrus and Lorena save the universe. I started to actually buy into all that, and as soon as I stopped doubting, and as soon as I stopped being skeptical of how it was all happening, and I started to really have like some emotional effects and issues, and I probably wasn't fully in my totally right state of mind for a little bit. I was really flummoxed thinking about all this. That's when KJ cut it off and said, listen Cyrus, who you're talking to right now is not who you think it is. It's not Lawrina. There was no angelic order. There was no ET race of homicidal machines who want to kill all of us. This is a collection of my own writing as a fiction writer in my world, combined with basically your own things that you've been reading about from these very negative sources of information. And the whole point of this was an Arcturian way of education called deliberation, where we provide somebody with a lot of nonsense plus truth, and then it's the student's job to separate fact from fiction, and this helps teach critical thinking on his world. And so he wanted to set up a scenario like that for me and the community, but it actually had massive backlash. And so by revealing this, which I have to reveal, it's going to damage the reputation of Afterlife Topics greatly. Some very well-known people, I think, have pretty much walked away now because of they were intuitively knowing that there was something really weird and fake about this whole thing, and so a lot of people have walked away. It's caused a lot of problems. I think what upset him the most is because I had a issue in Mexico. I had to visit a friend in Mexico who was in the hospital, but I didn't take enough precautions because I wasn't thinking straight. And so I ran down there, and it's only an hour away from here, but it's dangerous there now, so I got mugged. I had all my stuff taken. I lost a lot of money. I lost all my valuables. I had to cancel cards. I had charges put on many different things. And and also I injured myself running from this thief, and I actually broke my foot. Now, that is also really interesting too. Um, so, I get out of the situation. I was only gone for a little over a day, but rumors spread, and everyone thought Cyrus was dead. But I ended up spending, the night in Mexico, and I was hopping around on one foot because I didn't even have any time to get to the hospital. I wasn't sure what to do. But at this point, the facade was over, right? So I already knew that, what went on, but I was really staggered by it, and I wasn't in my right mind. I can't believe that I was kind of betrayed like this, or that I was catfished by a 400,000-year-old crotchety Arcturian guy who was pretending to be this woman that I was falling in love with, on a trans-dimensional level. So my mind was in all these kind of funky places, and meanwhile my foot actually has bones sticking out of it. So I was just like, where the heck, I guess I'll go to the same hospital my friend is at, but this can't be, what kind of medical attention is this going to be? How much is this going to cost me? I don't have insurance down here. I didn't buy insurance before I went. I'm hopping around on one foot. The police are being super nice to me down there and giving me everything I need to, to spend the night. They gave me a free place to stay. Thieves took my shoes. They gave me really nice shoes. So I had this like weird positive experience. But anyway, so I'm hopping around and my foot's broken. I'm in intense pain. And I'm like, what do I do first? I need to get to the hospital. Right? Do I need to get to the console, though, because I don't have any money. So I don't have an identification, so I can't go to the hospital if I have no identification, and I don't have any money, and they won't even let me in. But how do I handle, having a broken foot with my bone sticking out of it? And so KJ Kilamaja says, Cyrus, I feel like immense grief and immense guilt because I feel responsible for you with all this, and I'm going to, with other Arcturian menders, telepaths, we're going to make sure that your foot is healed. So I'm hopping around and I make it to the free place that the police provided for me to stay. I lie down, and let's just say within hours, and this is just one of the weirdest things that's ever happened to me. My foot, well, I can show you right now. Does it look very swollen to you? Right? Does my foot look very swollen? When it used to be like this with bone that was coming out of it, like up from this angle, and you couldn't touch it because it was extreme pain. Right now I can do this. This is like 3 days later, guys. Okay, we're on like day 3, I guess, since this all happened. I can walk on it now, and the bone just everything just fused back together. And Kilamaja was like, that's the least that I can do for you after everything that I put you through with that whole fake storyline, is that we can come down and we can take care of you physically like that. It's not a big deal for us. That just blows my mind. So all the weird stuff, paranoia, is Kilamaja also a negative entity? What was this whole thing that happened? One thing I can say is that communication was real. These effects were real. The people that I did quote-unquote readings with Lawrina with mostly got like profound and real and verifiable information. It was one thing after another that was real, and that's what made it so difficult for me to process that there was this ridiculous storyline that I was buying into. And that the end result was supposed to be for my own good and the good of everybody else, to be very mindful of what you bring into your life and accept and believe is true, because if you're not careful, you could end up living that reality. But then to tip it off, I had a bit of a miracle happen with my foot, which to me almost made this kind of horrible experience worth it, because that's just not normal. Like that, it's like total just medical miracle to me. So I'm very grateful about that, even though I lost money and had a real tough ride. So at the end of the day, to wrap this video up, that was what happened. That was the conclusion of Cyrus's spirit communication attempt, how all that blew up. And I know I lost a lot of subscribers, I lost a lot of people, but I just hope you understand that no one was fooled more by all that nonsense than me. That this communicator, if he's who he says he is, and I don't, based upon my history of this type of thing, I don't have really a reason to believe it's not, that that if it is, what we say it is, then this was an external thing that happened to me that I didn't want it to happen. I think it was a very, very foolish way on Kilamaja's part to do it this way. He feels immense grief. He works apparently in that world as a politician, and he's so upset about him being miscalibrated by doing something like this and seeing the damage it had on the community, the damage it had on me, and how it had this opposite effect and actually causes people now to doubt so many other things, that he, I believe, when I last was able to telepath with him, what was that he is resigning from his post even on Arcturus, and he just made it was a massive miscalculation that calls into question his psychological health. And going by the assumption that it is all true as it said it is, and I have some evidence to, in my mind, show that it is, then it shows you that guides, higher self guides, is what he calls himself with me, even though I'm not Arcturian, he's Arcturian. He just came into my life, I guess stuck his DNA into me when I was a fetus, and so his mind is bound to my mind in a way. This is how I guess it operates at that level. But it is proof that even people like that from the other side, from the astral spectrum, if you want to call it that, can be broken, psychologically damaged, and make very bad choices and decisions. So we cannot just give up our lives to guides. We cannot just give up our lives over, hand our lives over to whomever it is that we encounter on the other side to believe that they're oracles of wisdom. Just like we can't hand over our critical thinking faculties to YouTube videos that say that all this crazy stuff is happening. So, by the way, remember the Tic Tac video I made where I was talking to KJ and he was pretending to be pretending to be Lawrina, about what was the Tic Tac UFO. He said that was part of the nonsense, Cyrus, and he felt bad about, again, adding to the disinformation. He said that the Tic Tac UFO was not a UFO, it was a drone. It was a drone by a foreign government, but they were using some ET technology, and that they have some agenda in place he can't figure out. If there's any positive message that Kilamaja from Arcturus has, is that his group and government is working on some kind of extraterrestrial contact with us, and that he believes if ever there is like first contact, or if there is what we see on the news, a disclosure thing happening and they're rolling stuff out, he thinks it'll probably be with Arcturus, and that could be the big switch over. So, but who knows? Because at this point, I can't logically trust anything he says. Another good news is that KJ is not my only guide. And then when I opened myself up as a telepath, where I have crystal clear communication with these people, I discovered I have a guide who is KJ's guide, who is KJ's higher self. KJ's an Arcturian, and there's a different extraterrestrial that is KJ's, above KJ and me, who feels that she's looking out for both of us. And she had to really intervene as this was happening, that it was damaging us. And so her name is really interesting. It's like Ashnakala. So it's all melodic with her. So what she says, it's all like kind of musical notes. And I began doing this telepath interface with her. And I've been absolutely terrified that KJ did all this and is going to hurt Afterlife Topics, and it's going to hurt our community and hurt me and hurt my reputation. And so she's been really terrified. And she's the one who cut off communications between me and KJ. And long story short, there's nothing going on in here now. So I'm just, all the telepathic communications, everything that got activated, this other guide just flipped a switch and said, Cyrus, I'm going to give you a lot of time just to get over all this, so you're not stressed out by the blue guy or me or anyone. You can just recollect your thoughts and be at peace and focus on yourself and your life and the things that you have to do, and put this whole nonsense that her subject KJ pulled behind both of us. And there's a lot more I could probably do if I decided to learn about her and her identity, which is all in different ET species, which is like I guess they're from like this crystalline star, and they're very, very old, but she's very, very sweet. But it won't do any good because, in a way, logically, as a researcher myself, well, you can't trust what is coming out now because KJ ruined it all with a bunch of fake information. So what do you trust now? What do you believe is really happening? If I can talk about my other guide and say, oh, this time I really know it's it's this other being, everyone is going to be like, well, it's probably just KJ impersonating somebody else again. I know that's not true because KJ here has been having a total emotional breakdown, like I said, resigning from his position on that planet and all of this, and just totally losing it. I can feel his emotions coming into me, and it's tough to deal with. So I know that I'm pretty sure. I mean, I feel confident about what is going on and what's real and what's not real. And I was always skeptical about all of this stuff until towards the end. And it was only when I began to lose my skepticism that he came in and shut it all off. It was just, I think, just a really bad experiment, a really bad way to get a message across, a very deceptive way to act. And it shows to me, I think, that this being has immense psychological health difficulties, and it's caused a lot of pain, a lot of damage to a lot of people. But at the end of the day, as a paranormal researcher, what did we prove? What did we walk out of this with? That I have this incredible communication going on that I can tap into as a kind of like a telepath. We learned that it could be true that multiple parallel timelines are real, and that the nonsense and conspiracy theories you read about may be completely real for the people who talk about them. And by nonsense conspiracy theories, I mean like, the Queen is a reptile, or there's an AI threat that's going to kill us all. KJ makes it clear some of those things are completely accurate. Some of the things that are in our exopolitical world or metaphysical world, there's a lot of stuff that's totally real, and a lot of the communication information was real. But he's talking about the absurdities. He's talking about, again, like the negative, the artificial intelligence evil of alien race, and a completely unrealistic perspective of the shift, which he says the shift will happen, but it's going to be up to humanity to will it into existence in a way that makes sense. It just has to make more sense and be more logically founded than what Dolores Cannon was talking about. So his original goal was to bring people together and be able to teach them how we can manifest that type of thing into our reality in the way that the Arcturians do it, and so that we can get out of the third density into the fifth density and be living more like how we do astrally here on Earth. And he believes that can happen, and that's what he wants to happen. That was a big takeaway message. But will anyone listen to him now that he's destroyed his reputation? I don't know. Will anyone listen to me now that all this has happened? I don't know. But I will point out that coming forward with this puts my neck on the line. I've taken down all the popular videos that was the bogus information, and I could have just gone quiet about all this and covered it up so that I wouldn't have to face the music. But I'm a researcher, I'm a writer, and I'm, again, a paranormal researcher. So I'm doing what is my duty to do. And I'm telling you guys how this ended. And for those of you who think, oh, Cyrus is sick, he's not well, he's hearing voices. I mean, there's always going to be people like that. Keep in mind, this is afterlife topics and metaphysics, and this all fits what we talk about on this channel, even if this whole thing was an SHIT show. What I'll tell you right now is having a very bad skirt with danger and crisis in Mexico and coming back and now feeling good and feeling healthy and walking again and everything. Like, I actually feel really good right now. I think I feel better than I have in a long time. I just, there's some kind of extra clarity of thought that I didn't have before. And I have, this other connection with this new guide, which, now I'm super vigilant. I know kind of what's real and what's not real and how to discern information better. And I think that can develop into something really, really, really positive, if nothing else, just for me and my future as I go forward. So I hope you still stay on board with this channel and what I do, and write this down as a learning experience for everybody on multiple, just bizarre levels. Whew. That's it for this lecture, and that's it for this topic, I guess, with Lawrina and the angels and the Lovecraftian monsters and all of this kind of stuff. It's a lot to take in, but I think a lot of you guys kind of get it, and I can only put up with the comments and Facebook and everyone. Oh, Cyrus has gone crazy. He's lost his mind. look, guys, read The Trickster into Paranormal. I mean, there's a lot of cases of people getting kind of like not practical jokes, but this kind of thing happening to people where something is completely not as it seems, and then the reason is usually some weird like growing lesson plan thing. It's almost as like people in other densities, other realities just don't take Earth life seriously enough, and so they mess with us, if not for their own sadistic sense of pleasure, but it's because they have this lofty vision about, I'm going to mess with these people, but then I'm going to do it for their own good. Like that's just like such a common attitude from that side coming into this side, which also really sucks, doesn't it? Anyway, that's it for this broadcast. You can, if you still like what I'm doing, subscribe or become a patron or whatever, and I will still work with you personally, and do what I can to help out anyone else. And if you were like hurt by this, let me know and talk to me about it, and I'll talk to you about it, and I'll see what kind of value I can give you in exchange to clean up after what KJ has done. And if I have to keep picking up after his pieces, then I'll keep doing that, because I don't have much choice, I suppose, and I want to make it right as well. So if you were hurt by any of this, just email me, Cyrus at Cyrus Kirkpatrick, and whatever I can do to help. So anyway, that's it for now, and I'll see you guys on the next video.